All right. So I just want to come on and talk a little bit about Facebook Messenger and HIPAA, because I get this question a lot, and I actually just got this question a couple of times over the last couple of days. And so I figured I would just answer the question during a live, and that way I'm not just answering it to a single person, everybody can benefit. So a couple of things to know about Facebook Messenger and how that kind of plays in, not just from a HIPAA standpoint, but also how it plays in from the standpoint of what the patient or the prospective patient would like to use in terms of communication. So one thing to note is that your patients or your leads can actually choose their preferred method of communication. So that is something that we hear all the time when people say, well, I can totally use, you know, X, Y, or Z platform because that's what my patient says they want to use. Kind of. So let's just kind of clarify that a little bit. So while the government says that the patient has the right to choose the preferred method of communication, meaning like if they email you, then they're basically saying that it's okay to email them back. This is true. If they call you, they're basically saying it's okay to call them back. This is true, unless they renege on that permission in some way, shape, or form. However, the government also says that if you're transmitting PHI, then you have to use an approved method that will sign a business associate agreement with you. It has to be a HIPAA compliant method. It doesn't have to be encrypted. People think all the time that encryption is required, but if you actually look at the security rule and you see that there's like 52, depending on how you divide it up, there's about 52 parts to the security rule. What you'll find is that those parts are divided up into either required or addressable. Okay, and if you look at encryption, it's on there a couple of times. It's encryption both in transit and encryption while stored. And both of those are actually what's called addressable parts of the security rule. They're not required. Now, I do want to say, because I can almost hear some of you out there kind of gasping like, what? Encryption is required. I hear this all the time. It's not required. It's addressable. That means you still have to address it in your risk assessment. And you still have to decide whether it is reasonable and appropriate for you to apply encryption to whatever it is we're assessing at the time as part of your risk analysis. But you get to score that as part of your own risk analysis, and you get to determine whether it's reasonable and appropriate for you to implement, right? Now, one caveat to that, while we're talking about email and texting and any other form of communication, I wouldn't say that encryption is not important. It's not required, okay? But here's where it could be a butt saver, is that if for some reason you didn't encrypt your email, let's say, and email got out or there was a complaint or whatever happens, if there's a breach of that PHI and there's no encryption, then that's what's called a reportable event. You are required to report that to the government. Now, if it's under 500 people that are breached, then you have some time to report it. If it's 500 or more that are breached, then you have to report it immediately. And there's different reporting, guidelines, and I'm not going to go into all that right now, but just understand that encryption is a butt saver. If you can, if it's reasonable and appropriate to implement encryption, then yes, you want to do that, because if for some reason there's a breach, but the information is encrypted, then it's not a reportable event. Whew, right? I mean, doesn't that take a load off? Now, getting back to preferred method of communication. When somebody wants to communicate with you via email, that's fine. Their email is not encrypted. Their email is not HIPAA compliant. They don't need a business associate agreement with the email vendor, right? But unfortunately, on your side, if you're the covered entity or you're the business associate that's managing the email from the other side, then you are required to have a business associate agreement with that vendor. So whether we're talking about texting or email or whatever, you have to make sure that you're choosing a HIPAA compliant option. And there are options out there. There's lots of options for email and texting where you can get a business associate agreement, or in the case of texting, you can even work with us and we'll help you so that you can use Twilio and not have to have a business associate agreement with them, because we have a solution that actually turns them into a conduit. It's complex. It's not something that I'm going to fully describe on here, but if that's something you're using, let me know and I can help you. Now, that being said, the question that I get, the question that I get a lot is, what about Facebook Messenger? So there's actually two answers to that question right now, because we're in the middle of this whole COVID-19 thing and the government has relaxed some of their normal restrictions. And I'll show you that here in just a second. There's two things to think about. What does the government say about it? And what does Facebook say about it, right? So it's not just the government that's dictating what you can or can't use Messenger for. So let's look at that. Number one, Messenger is a Facebook product, right? And Facebook is not going to sign a business associate agreement with you. So just, you know, if we go down to bare bones basics, Facebook Messenger is not an approved method of communication if you are transmitting PHI, which if you have it, let's say on your Facebook page, you're a dentist and you have Messenger pop up on your Facebook page. Hey, what can I help you with, right? Seemingly that sounds great, but the minute somebody connects with you on Messenger in the context of a future provision of care, that's PHI. So unfortunately, you know, that means that Messenger is not an option in a normal day. Okay. Let me pull up what Facebook actually says about it. Let me grab my thing here. So you can look this up yourself. This is just from Facebook. And I just did a search in their policy. I just did a search for healthcare so I could find it easily. So you can try that. Basically, it says don't use Messenger to facilitate direct conversations between people and healthcare providers or to send or collect any patient data obtained for healthcare providers. So just understand this. While Facebook has they have like what, 1 billion terms, okay, and we're not going to memorize all of them. Just keep in mind that Facebook does once in a while like to go through their terms and do a sweep across all their accounts and or a segment of their accounts. And that's when, you know, as a marketer, that's when we start to hear, hey, my account just got, you know, shut down for this. Oh, mine did too. Or I heard that happened to somebody else. So you want to be careful about going against Facebook's terms of service. Okay. So this is one thing. Don't use Messenger for direct communication between people and healthcare providers, unfortunately. Now, are 90+% of the Facebook pages out there that are medical using Messenger? Yeah. But it's a risk. It's a risk from a Facebook terms of service standpoint. It's also definitely a risk from a HIPAA standpoint. And not necessarily because the government's going to come after you, but because if one person complains, that's all it takes. It's a complaint-driven process, unfortunately, and people are natural complainers. And so that's kind of what you're up against. That's the risk that you have to kind of mitigate. So I'm going to always tell people Facebook Messenger, because they're not going to take the position of being a business associate and they're not going to sign that BAA with you, then technically, if you're looking at just pure regulations, not even their terms of service, then Messenger is not an option for communication, even if you're just talking about leads. Now, I will say there's one other thing I'll show you, and that is the relaxed telehealth regulations. So just because we're in the middle of all of this COVID-19 stuff, there is a little bit of a different answer that I will provide you for a period of time, and that's just based on what the government is telling us. So this is the official document. You can go find it on the Office for Civil Rights website, and it's the FAQs on telehealth and HIPAA during COVID-19 nationwide public health emergency. Okay, so what does all that mean? I'm going to skip through a lot of this. I'm going to go straight to number 10, because number 10 is where they talk specifics. Number 10 is where they say, what is a non-public facing remote communication product? Okay, so the non-public facing remote communication products are the ones that they are allowing for a period of time for us to use to connect with patients or prospects from a HIPAA standpoint. So what are those? Well, if you look at the examples they leave you right here, there's such platforms as Apple FaceTime, Facebook Messenger video chat, Google Hangouts video, WhatsApp video chat, Zoom, or Skype, plain old Skype, you guys. So, but they also call out such products would also include commonly used texting applications such as Signal, Jabber, and looky here, Facebook Messenger, okay, plus Google Hangouts, WhatsApp, iMessage, okay? So all of these things right now are available for you to use to communicate with patients or prospective patients. I don't know when this is going to end. It could end in a week. It could end in 6 months. I have no idea. Obviously, the moment that I find out when it's going to end, I will let you know. So if you are a provider and you have Facebook Messenger open on your page, I would say right now you could potentially just leave that available to people and allow them to use that for communication. But just understand it is a short-term option. It is not, and clearly they don't approve of it all the time, or they wouldn't have called it out in this document as an option for right now. I mean, if it was always an option, they wouldn't have called it out in the document, right? So it's obvious that they don't approve it normally, but right now they're basically saying you can use it for this period of time. So I will let you know as soon as I find out. I get notifications galore from all kinds of places, including the government, about even my lawyer, who's a former HIPAA investigator. He sends me notifications sometimes that he thinks I should know about because he knows what I'm doing to help y'all. So as soon as I hear that this restriction is going back to being restricted, then I will let you know. But for right now, you can use, we were specifically talking about Facebook Messenger. You can use Facebook Messenger to communicate with your patients right now. Just keep in mind, it's not something that's going to work forever. So as soon as they take this relaxation off these restrictions, you're going to have to find other ways to communicate. And that's pretty much that. Now, also keep in mind, because I can't control what Facebook's going to do, their terms of service do say that you're not supposed to use it for that communication, but I mean, you're going to have to decide if that's an acceptable risk for you. But certainly once the government takes these relaxed restrictions away and we go back to normal, I would highly encourage you guys not to use Facebook Messenger for communication, whether it's, back and forth between the covered entity and the patient, or even the covered entity as a lead generation tool. You don't want to use Facebook Messenger. It's a single complaint that could ruin your day. And then a couple years worth of investigation and another 2 or 3 years of Big Brother kind of hanging over your shoulder, making sure that you're doing everything right. And by the way, I've been on the other side of these things when, a government regulator shows up and for whatever reason, and they start demanding information. I've been on the other side of that, where I've been, because I've done a lot of consulting in the healthcare realm, and I've been the one that got the, urgent call to come to somebody's office because some regulator just showed up and they want to look at something. And oftentimes I'm the one that's helping them find that information because of my role as a consultant, what I used to do for 12 years. You don't want to be there. You just don't want to be there. It's not worth it. You guys find another way to communicate, but you can use Facebook Messenger for now, as long as you're not concerned about the Facebook terms of service. And then as soon as they shut that down or let us know that they're going to shut that down as an option, I will come back on live and I will talk to you about it again. Okay. If anybody has any questions, feel free to comment and I will absolutely do what I can to get you the information that you're looking for. If you have questions about texting, email, different ways to do that compliantly, let me know. I can help you with that as well, especially if you're using something like Twilio, because obviously we have a solution that we just released for Twilio, where we can help you make Twilio HIPAA compliant without paying exorbitant amounts of money. And it doesn't matter whether you have one Twilio account that you need to do that for, or 100 Twilio accounts you need to do that for. Like if you're a marketer and you have multiple, I can help you with that. Just let me know what questions you have, and feel free to either comment or reach out to me on Facebook Messenger. Okay. Have a great day, you guys.